Hello, stormwater designers. Welcome back to Clear Creek Solutions hydrology educational videos. We've been talking about the minimum requirements, and now we're moving on to minimum requirement number 2. We have a free WWHM course that you can access by going to the description box down below, where you can learn more about how to use the software WWHM, which is used in Western Washington to help meet some of these minimum requirements. Anyways, let's move on. We covered minimum requirement number 1 in the last video. We're looking at minimum requirement number 2, which is Construction Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, or SWPPP, I guess, which is what it's abbreviated as. It's going to cover project thresholds, which is all new development and redevelopment projects are responsible for preventing erosion and discharge of sediment and other pollutants into the receiving waters. So projects which result in 2,000 square feet or more of new plus replaced hard surface area, or of which 7,000 square feet of more of land must prepare a construction stormwater pollution prevention plan as part of the minimum requirement number 1. So projects below these thresholds are not required to prepare a construction plan, but must consider all the construction elements and develop controls for those elements that pertain to the project site. So the construction plan shall include a narrative and drawings. All BMPs should be clearly referenced in the narrative and marked, and the construction plan narrative shall include documentation to explain and justify the pollution prevention decisions. And so each of the 13 elements, which are going to be listed and we're going to cover here, must be considered and included in the construction plan unless site conditions render the element unnecessary and the exemption is clearly justified. Clearing and grading activities for development shall be permitted only if conducted pursuant to an improved site development plan, e.g. subdivision approval, that establishes permitted areas of clearing, grading, cutting, and filling. In these permitted clearing and grading areas and any other areas required to preserve critical or sensitive areas, buffers, native growth, protection easements, or tree retention areas shall be delineated on the plans and the site. So for seasonal work limitations from October 1st through April 30th, clearing, grading, and other soil disturbing activities shall only be permitted if shown to the satisfaction of the local authority that silt-laden runoff will be prevented from leaving the site, because these are the wettest months of the year. So site conditions including existing vegetative coverage, slopes, soil type, and proximity to receiving waters, and limitations on activities in the extent of disturbed areas, and also proposed erosion and sediment control measures. So following activities are exempt from seasonal clearing and grading limitations: the routine maintenance and necessary repair of erosion and sediment control BMPs, routine maintenance of public facilities or existing utility structures that do not expose the soil or result in the removal of the vegetative cover to soil, and activities where there's 100% infiltration of surface water runoff within the site in approved and installed erosion and sediment control facilities. So the objective is to control erosion and prevent sediment and other pollutants from leaving the site during the construction phase of a project, and to have fully functional stormwater BMPs for the developed site upon the completion of construction. So some supplemental guidelines. If a construction plan is found to be inadequate, then the plan approval authority within the government shall require that the construction stormwater BMPs be implemented as appropriate. And the plan approval authority may allow development of generic construction WSPPPs that allow to commonly conducted public road activities such as road surface replacement that trigger the minimum requirement. They may also develop an abbreviated construction plan format for project sites that will disturb less than 1 acre. And so based on the information provided and the weather conditions, the permitting authority may expand or restrict the limitations of site disturbance. And then if clearing and grading limits or erosion and sediment control measures shown in the approved plan are not maintained. And then the primary project proponent shall coordinate with utilities and other contractors the stormwater management requirements for the entire project, including utilities, when preparing this plan. And so let's talk about the elements. So there's suggested BMPs for 9 different elements. Element 1 is plastic, metal, fabric fence, or other physical barriers may be used to mark the clearing limits and promote practical use. And so there's a list of suggested BMPs for that. And then the second element is establish construction access. So minimize construction site access points along linear projects such as roadways. Street washing may require local jurisdictional approvals, and there's quite a few suggested BMPs for that measure. Third element is control flow rates, which protect properties and waterways downstream of development sites from erosion and the associated discharge of turbid waters due to increases in the velocity and peak volumetric flow rate of stormwater runoff from the project site. Where necessary to comply with the above compliance, construct stormwater infiltration or detention BMPs as one of the first steps in grading. Assure that detention BMPs function properly before constructing site improvement. If permanent infiltration BMPs are used for temporary flow control during construction, protect these BMPs from siltation during construction phases. Then they have some more suggested BMPs for element 3. For element 4, install sediment controls, design, install, and maintain effective erosion controls and sediment controls to minimize the discharge of pollutants. Construct sediment control BMPs, sediment ponds, traps, filters. As one of the first steps in gradings, these BMPs must be functional before other land disturbing activities take place. Minimize sediment discharges from the site, and then direct stormwater runoff from disturbed areas through BMP or other appropriate sediment removal BMP before the runoff leaves a construction site or before discharge speed to an infiltration facility. Runoff from fully stabilized areas may be discharged without a sediment removal BMP, but must control flow rates per element 3. Then we want to locate BMPs intended to trap sediment on site in a manner to avoid interference with the movement of juvenile salmonoids attempting to enter off-channel areas or drainage. Provide and maintain natural buffers around surface waters, direct stormwater to vegetated areas to increase sediment removal, and maximize stormwater infiltration unless infeasible. And then where feasible, design outlet structures that withdraw impounded stormwater from the surface to avoid discharging sediment that's still suspended lower in the water column, and they have a list of suggested BMPs for that element. Then there's element 5, which is stabilized soils. So stabilize exposed and unworked soils by application of effective BMPs that prevent erosion. Applicable BMPs include, but are not limited to, temporary and permanent seeding, sodding, mulching, plastic covering, and so on. The early application of gravel based on areas to be paved, and dust control. Control stormwater volume and velocity within the site to minimize soil erosion. Control stormwater discharges, both peak flow rates and total stormwater volume, to minimize erosion. Soils must not remain exposed and unworked for more than the time period set forth below. During the dry season, May 1st to September 30th, 7 days, and during the wet season, 2 days from October 1st to April 30th. Stabilize soils at the end of the shift before a holiday or weekend if needed based on the weather forecast. Stabilize soil stockpiles, minimize the amount of soil exposed, minimize disturbance of steep slopes, and minimize soil compaction, and unless infeasible, preserve the topsoil. And there's a list of applicable BMPs there for that element. Now we're on to element 6, which is protect the slopes. So design and construct cut and fill slopes in a manner to minimize erosion, divert off-site stormwater or groundwater away from the slopes, and at the top slopes, collect drainage on pipe slope drains or protected channels to prevent erosion using a single hydrograph method, or preferably a continuous simulation method. The hydrologic analysis must use the existing land cover conditions for predicting flow rates from tributary areas outside the project limits. If using the Western Washington hydrology model to predict flows, bare soil areas should be modeled as landscape. Place excavated material on the uphill side of the trenches consistent with safety and space considerations, and place check dams at regular intervals. These are the applicable BMPs. There's quite a few, including check dams, water bars, and gradient terraces. And for element 7, protect all storm drain inlets made operable during construction so that stormwater runoff does not enter the conveyance system without first being filtered or treated. Clean or remove and replace inlet protection devices when sediment has filled 1/3 of the storage. And then BMP C222 is inlet protection. Then element 8, stabilize channels and outlets. Design, construct, and stabilize all on-site conveyance channels to prevent erosion from the flow rate calculated by one of the following methods: a single event method or continuous simulation. The hydrologic analysis must use the existing, so it's just the same standards there. There's 4 BMPs for element 8. And then element 9 is control pollutants, design, install, implement, and maintain effective pollution prevention measures, handle and dispose of pollutants, including waste materials and demolition debris, provide cover, containment, and protection from vandalism for all chemicals, liquid products, petroleum, and so on. Conduct maintenance, fueling, and repair of heavy equipment. Discharge wheel wash or tire bath wash wastewater to separate on-site treatment. And apply fertilizers and pesticides in a manner and at application rates that will not result in loss of chemical to stormwater runoff. Follow manufacturer's label requirements for application rates and procedures. Use BMPs to prevent contamination of stormwater runoff by pH modifying sources. Adjust the pH of stormwater if necessary to prevent violations of water quality. Assure the washout of concrete trucks is performed off-site or in designated areas. Obtain written approval from ecology before using chemical treatment other than CO2, dry ice, or food-grade vinegar. and uncontaminated water from water-only based shaft drilling for construction of building, road, and bridge foundations may be infiltrated provided the wastewater is managed in a way that prohibits discharge to surface waters. Then there is 7 applicable BMPs there. Then element 10, controlled dewatering, discharge foundation, vault, and trench dewatering water, which has similar characteristics to stormwater runoff. Discharge clean, non-turbid dewatering water, such as well point groundwater to systems tributary to or directly into surface waters of the state as specified in element 8. Handle highly turbid or otherwise contaminated dewatering water separately. Other dewatering treatment or disposable options may include infiltration, transport off-site, ecology improved on-site chemical treatment, sanitary or combined sewer discharge, or use of sedimentation bag that discharges to a ditch or swale for small volumes. There's a couple of BMPs there. And now on to element 11, which is maintain the BMPs for repair and remove all temporary erosion and sediment control BMPs within 30 days. Materials on hand and certified erosion and sediment control lead are the 2 BMPs there. And for element 12, we need to manage the project, phase development projects to the maximum degree practicable, and take into account seasonal work limitations. Inspect, maintain, and repair all BMPs as needed to assure continued performance of their intended functions. Projects regulated under the Construction Stormwater General Permit must conduct site inspections and monitoring in accordance with Special Condition S4. Projects that disturb 1 or more acres must have site inspections conducted by a certified erosion and sediment control lead, and project sites disturbing less than 1 acre may have a CESCL or a person with a CESCL certification conduct inspections. And there's 3 BMPs applicable there. And then finally, element 13, protect low-impact development BMPs. The primary purpose of the on-site stormwater management is to reduce the disruption of the natural site hydrology through infiltration, protect all LID BMPs by retention, rain garden, permeable pavements from sedimentation through installation and maintenance of erosion and sediment control BMPs on portions of the site that drain into the LID BMPs. Maintain the infiltration capabilities, control the erosion. Permeable pavement fouled with sediments or no longer passing an initial infiltration test must be cleaned, and keep all heavy equipment off existing soils under LID BMPs that have been excavated to final grade to retain the infiltration rate of the soils. And then we have 9 BMPs applicable there. So that is covering minimum requirement 2. A lot to take in. I would encourage you to go read the manual yourself, but that is the quickest overview I could provide. Essentially using BMPs to prevent as much erosion and pollutant flows into the natural conditions as possible and being responsible during construction. So that is covering minimum requirement 2. We're going to jump to minimum requirement 3 next. And leave a comment if you have a question. We'll see you guys in the next video.